I am on here tonight to talk with Dennis. Dennis, say hi to everybody.
Hi, everybody.
Dennis Holman. Am I saying your last name right? I'm always afraid I'm going to mess it up. Did I mess it up?
Perfectly.
Good. Dennis is here live streaming from the hills of Orchard Park. Correct, Dennis?
That's right. Absolutely.
And how's it going, Dennis? Are you quarantining okay? I heard someone's making scones back there.
They are, and thank God that they do. My wife really is. She's a good cook, and she's getting a lot of practice now. We're both home together. We're staying home, and we go out and walk 2 miles every day. And we order our food from Wegmans and pick it up outside through Instacart. And it's a pretty circumspect life because we haven't been out to dinner now for a couple of months.
How long do you think you can keep this up?
Well, being a retired guy, you get used to being at home a lot, and I could probably go this way a long time. I'm not sure how sane I'd be though.
Well, you seem pretty sane. So let me ask you this. How did you get involved in my campaign, or our campaign, I should say?
Well, I got to meet you a couple years ago when you first ran, and I came to a couple fundraisers, and I said, well, I wanted to, I was really tired of the fact that our district had been gerrymandered and that Chris Collins was my representative. And I said, I want to find out who the opposition is, and I wanted to talk to him in person. And that's how I first met you. And that you almost came in, you almost won that race. But subsequently, a couple years later, you started reaching out and said you were running again. And I said, well, this time, I think I'm going to do something more than just give a few dollars or whatever. I wanted to volunteer, get some skin in the game, and see if we could get you elected.
Well, thank you for doing that. And you've really put a lot of skin in the game. You've been making tons and tons of phone calls. How many phone calls do you think you've made, approximately?
Probably over 1,000, but above that, I really don't know.
He's part of our field program. Dennis is part of our field program. All of you listening can be part of our field program too. And what we do is we contact people who are likely to vote. And we ask those folks who are likely to vote. Well, right now, our script has changed, hasn't it? For the last few months, we've been asking people if they're okay, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
What has that been like for you? Has that been difficult?
It's not so difficult. I think there's I kind of personally changed the way I approach that a little. At first, some people were a little bit nonplussed by the fact that somebody from a political campaign would be asking how they were, and I got some people, they were incredulous a little bit.
Right.
And, but I started turning that around a little bit as soon as we started getting the news that we could vote via mail, and that's kind of changed in a couple steps because the ballots. First, there was going to be a absentee ballot, and now everybody's going to get the absentee ballots. So we started talking a lot about that. I was asking people, especially once we knew they could do that, if they would go to the Erie County website and sign up. And so I mixed that along with asking them how they were doing. If I sensed that there was something that they were uncomfortable, if there was something going on in their life, I would make sure that I asked if they needed help or something that we could use our resources for to help them. So I combined the two things.
We created that list of possible resources that we can share with people. I know there's been some good stories, but in the beginning, I was worried because I didn't want to make people feel like we were trying to manipulate them. But thankfully, I think a lot of people have actually been grateful that we were reaching out to help, because there isn't any congressman providing constituent services right now. So I'm proud of you and everybody else who was part of this or has been doing this for the last few months. And I'm grateful to you, Dennis. I appreciate it.
Well, it's been fun, and I've been learning a lot by talking to people too. And the fun thing I think is learning that you can speak right off the cuff spontaneously and respond to anything that comes up. And
so let's do a role play here, okay?
Okay.
All right. Okay. I'm a caller. You're gonna call me. Here we go.
Right. Okay. Hi,
Sorry,
Nate.
put you on the spot.
May I
Here
please speak to Nate?
this is Nate. What do you want?
Hi, Nate. This is Dennis. I'm a volunteer for the Nate McMurray campaign for Congress. And I'm calling you because you're a registered Democrat. And uh, I
I
want
voted
to know that
Republican,
the
Dennis.
June 23rd election is still on and that you can now vote by the mail. But that's going to be a two-step process. And let me tell you how it works. You're going to get an application.
Hey, Dennis, time out. You're actually persuading me to vote for myself here. It's not bad. So let me ask. So this is the biggest problem. That was really good. The biggest problem we're having is people are confused about how to vote right now, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So let's talk about that. What is the number one mistake people are making?
The number one mistake is thinking that the application that they're getting for the absentee ballot is actually the ballot itself.
Right.
And people don't, sometimes they get the envelope with the application in it. They think it's the ballot and they'll say, oh, I can leave this till a few weeks before the election before I send it in. They don't realize that it's a two-step process.
I've talked to a lot of people who think they voted already. I'm like, well, how did you vote? My name's not on the application.
Well, I had some people ask me when they said, I know I have a ballot here, and they opened the envelope up, and then they said, I can't find a name on here.
Hold on a second. Hold on a second. Dennis, I want to do some shout outs to the people watching. We got 25 people watching at home at least. Michael Sharp, how are you? Karen Hoke, Bill Hoke, how are you guys? Adam, Kate Askew, we miss you. Hey, Eric Anderson, Grand Island's here, I think. Hey, is that the right Eric Anderson? If it's you, Eric, hi, we long time no see. Jane, always on, always supportive. Jane, we are very grateful. And then Jane Cass is on here too. Jim Snidecki from Grand Island, and my buddy Jason Wood from Brown University out there in Rhode Island is on. Hey, Jay, how are you? I just wanted to do that because it's so fun to see all these people come on. If you guys have questions, I'm going to be watching the feed. You can ask the questions. Mary, thank you for saying that, even though you're not in my district. Hi, Karen. Good to see you. Quick question. Do we have a list of people who are not on voter rolls who can be called? That's a good question. I don't have the answer for that off that. Go ahead, Dennis. You might know better than me.
Do we have a list of people who
We usually don't call people not on the voter rolls because statistically speaking, the people who usually vote are the people on the voter rolls. I mean, we're not doing any voter outreach because we have limited resources. So
Right.
we try to get those people who are frequent voters to come out to vote.
Well, we have to preach to the choir. We reinforce that, so we're calling mostly registered Democrats, and there's a good reason for it. You need to keep reinforcing that they're Democrats and that they need to support Democrats, and that when Democrats vote, Democrats win. And to me, that's a repeating theme that I use.
I think even though we're vastly outnumbered in this district, I want to tell everybody that's listening, if we get the base to vote, our chances go up dramatically. And if all of you vote and if we got all the registered Democrats to vote, we win in a landslide because so many people do not vote. Only a small percentage of the overall total number of possible votes actually vote. So even though it's gerrymandered, if we get all of our team to vote, our chances go way up. That's why what you're doing, Dennis, on a daily basis, making those calls, helps us out tremendously.
Yeah, I don't know how we would actually reach out beyond the list of registered voters. And I'm not sure how much effort we would want to put into people who don't go out to vote, who aren't registered in a party. We have signs and things to do that, I guess. And
I got to mention, we got Jay Wood again. I miss you, Jay. Alice Elaine is on. How are you, Alice? Gordon? Always good to see Gordon on here, a former guest on this little broadcast that we have. AJ, good to see you. Michael, good to see you too. So I want to say to you for a second, thank you again for doing this. Let's go into your background a bit. You grew up in Buffalo.
That's right. I was born in Buffalo. My dad was a World War II veteran. My mom's from the Buffalo area, and I spent the first 10 years of my life in West Seneca, and then my Dad was able to gather up enough money to build his own house in Orchard Park, and we moved out there when I was about 10 years old, and that's where I grew up.
By the way, I'll get to you guys' questions in a minute. I want to talk to Dennis for a second. So, Dennis, you grew up you spent most of your life in Orchard Park then. Your dad was a World War II vet, and he moved you guys out there, and that's your home.
Exactly. Yeah. And I went to school here. I mean, I went besides Orchard Park High School. At the time, it was called Erie County Technical Institute, and I went and studied electrical technology. And I got an associate degree at Erie County Tech. And,
so you're an electrician?
No, I'm an electronics technician, and I've worked in engineering. I've worked at a place called TXRX Systems in Angola, New York, and I also spent the last 10 years of my career at Moog in East Aurora.
Oh my goodness! Well, you've had a good career then. You've had some good places you've worked.
Yes, I have.
So you enjoy that stuff?
Oh yeah, I grew up I fell in love with radios when I was a kid, listening to shortwave radio and signals coming from around the world, and that got me interested in electronics.
I remember before the internet was a thing, because I was always interested in foreign languages. I hooked up the flagpole in my yard to be a giant shortwave radio antenna.
It probably worked well.
It did. So, I mean, I would get French radio broadcasts, and I saved my money, and I bought this really cool shortwave radio, because that was like a high-end technology back then.
Oh, yes.
And I would sit in my room at night and listen to foreign broadcasts, and I still marvel, because I'm kind of in that generation that was half in the internet world and not. And I kind of marvel how wonderful the world is now that we can be so easily connected like this. And as some people complain about it, but I think it's fantastic most of the time that we can read about other countries and hear about other places so easily now.
Oh yeah. The beauty of back in the day of shortwave is that you could hear news from all over the world, and it was unvarnished, and the biases it carried were from the country it came from, not from your own press. And I used to love that. I used to love listening to Radio Moscow and the BBC and Deutsche Welle from Germany.
Right.
And unfortunately, I didn't really get to practice the French that I learned in high school.
No, it was always too fast on those broadcasts. But so speaking of that, your daughter now, she was like me. She's a Fulbright scholar, right? And she was in India.
That's correct. And she lives in India right now, in New Delhi, India. And she's in lockdown, by the way. She's been spending most of her time in her apartment in India because they're doing the same social distancing we're doing. And she's doing her business, her work via Zoom meetings right now in India. So they have very much the same conditions, except they have a lot fewer cases of the virus than we do. So
when you were when you're hearing from her, what are they doing? Their quarantine is a lot more severe, right?
It's more, I think it's more it's much more highly enforced. They have police patrols that go around, and when they find people that are out without masks or seem to be out wandering around without going to a specific destination, they usually will give them reminders that they're either supposed to be going to a destination where they need to take care of, like purchasing their own food, or they need to go home.
Right. But they're doing well. They're handling COVID much better than we are. They have far fewer deaths, right?
That is correct. And officially, at least, we know that's what it is, a much lower number of deaths. And this has to be looked at in the context of the fact that India has 3 times as many people as the United States. There are now 1 billion people there.
So you've been to India, right?
Yes, I have.
So have I, for business, and it's impossible to socially distance in India. I mean, there's so many. I mean, it's impossible. So how are they doing it?
Well, if you're sort of a middle class or upper middle class person, life there in the last 10 years has turned into a lot like life here in the United States, especially in the big cities. But the majority of the people, they're taxi cab drivers, food vendors that are out on the street all the time. And those people, I think it's impossible for them to social distance. They did have a problem because a lot of the local businesses were shut down. The food vendors, the various little shops that sell housewares and stuff, and they're all little shops. They shut them all down. And a lot of people that work there are migrants. They come into the city to do some of these jobs, and they had no place to go, so they all started walking back to their hometowns out in the countryside in India. There wasn't enough transportation for them, and there was some social upheaval about that. The government was pretty strict about what people could or couldn't do. I don't know all the other details of what was going on.
I tell you what, she works for an NGO that's helping women start businesses, right? Your daughter.
That's one of the things. Yes. Yeah, to start businesses, help women get training. The average Indian girl maybe has gone through 6th or 8th grade, and when it comes to getting a decent job, they need additional training. So they do a lot of vocational training. For instance, she was working with a Honda Motor Corporation to help train young women to be security guards in some of the big shopping malls in India, in the New Delhi area.
And what's her organization called? Can you tell us?
Yes, it's called the Center for Social Research, CSR, as it's called.
So how long has she been there? How many years?
8 years.
8. Wow. So does she speak Hindi then a little bit, or?
Yeah, she did. She studied Hindi. She says she doesn't speak it very well, but while we were there and she did a lot of communicating for us, everybody thought, the Indian people thought she spoke Hindi very well.
This is a strange thing, but I guess you would say my ancestors, my great grandfather, not my grandfather, my great grandfather. Listen, I don't want to screw this up, but somewhere along the line, many of my family members were in India with the British, and they actually were settled after they were in India. As part of their service, they were settled in Canada. So I've always been fascinated with India since I was young, because I knew that. And my family came, not my whole family, but part of my family came to Canada, then came down to Buffalo. But they came to Canada via India. It's kind of amazing. So yeah,
I had never heard that there was that kind of migration.
Yeah, there was. I guess they were part of this British officers' corps, and they were given land in Canada. That's part of my ancestry. I mean, that's the McMurray part of it. But there's, it's not my whole family history. But yeah, I always thought that was interesting. So when I first went to when I first went to India, I proudly told that story to everybody, but no one seemed to care. Or they were very disinterested. But I really enjoyed India. I like the food more than anything else.
Oh yeah, so did I. And they have amazing food in some of the tiniest little restaurants that are kind of in the very crowded, almost seamy areas of New Delhi. Old Delhi is the northern part of the city, and it's really crowded and teeming. And of course, when you go to India, you're warned about eating. You don't want to drink the water, and you have to be careful about what you eat. We went into some little tiny restaurants, and my daughter feels very comfortable there. We had some of the most tremendous meals in a little tiny delicatessen type restaurant that you could ever imagine. And so, yeah, the food is wonderful there. And there's so much fresh produce. It just is brought into the city every day. And there's hucksters with carts that come in and you can walk out of your apartment and go down to the parking lot and find a huckster there selling you tons of fresh fruit.
I always heard don't eat anything. I ate everything. I had no problem whatsoever. Every time I went there, maybe I have steel intestines. I don't know. I had no problems.
That's interesting. We didn't either. The only thing that we did do was drink bottled water. That was considered necessary.
There was stuff I ate there. I don't want to get too deep into this because nobody cares but you and me probably. But there's stuff I ate there that I can never find again. You know what I mean? I remember I had these almost like tacos once. They were so good, like these sandwiches. And there's like, it's like the same thing with like Chinese food or any other food. There's so many different types of Indian food that are just simply not available to us here. But anyway, I had a great experience. We'll send your regards to your daughter. What is she saying about the response to COVID? That's how they view it from India's perspective.
Well, they're aghast. They're shocked by what's going on in the United States. The way it's being presented by our federal government is being broadcast all over the world. What happens in Washington is seen every place, and people in India are very political. The middle class people that she and upper class people that she worked with are very attuned to what's going on in the United States, and they can't believe what's happening. I mean, to them, it looks like the United States is coming apart at the seams because we can't seem to manage this the way they thought we could.
Yeah, I think most of the world is kind of shocked that we're not doing so well. I mean, everybody I talk, all my friends that live overseas, I talk to them. I sometimes bring this up, by the way, and I'll say, hey, my family in South Korea is shocked by what's happening in America, or my buddy in Germany, or my buddy in New Zealand. And the response I get from Americans so often is, we don't care. Not all of them. They're just so. But I want to say to people, why don't you care? Because in my experience, and I have a lot of experience overseas, more than a lot of people, somehow, but in my experience, much of the world looks up to America in some way, even if that's not the way they articulate it. They look to us as an example of a system of law that can be emulated, or they look to us as an example of whatever that, or they like the cultural contributions of America. They like our music, our movies. There is a shock going on throughout the entire world right now, a shock that we've handled this so poorly. You want to speak about that? Do you agree or no?
Oh, I agree completely because I have friends overseas. I have friends in Canada who are kind of shocked at the way the United States has been handling this. And the last comment on this I heard last night on Amanpour and Company, and she was interviewing Margaret Sullivan, who used to be the editor at the Buffalo News, went to the New York Times, now at the Washington Post, and a gentleman named.
She was. I mean, you go ahead and listen.
I'm sorry.
No, I was saying, in my experience, she was great.
Yes. Anyway, they were talking last night, and this gentleman who's involved in the press in Ireland was saying that they're just appalled at what's going on in the United States, and they think that the United States, besides it's losing its standing in the world as somebody to look to as a guiding light, and that we may never be able to recover from this.
Exactly. Listen, we'll recover, but we'll only recover if we beat this guy in the White House. And I want to tell the average people, when he says "Make America Great Again," what he's done is he's made America look foolish in the eyes of many people, and weak. And I think America should never look foolish and weak, and it makes me angry. It makes me really angry. And I think that our country we should lead the way in technology. We should not follow these other countries. And we were always a leader, and I believe in my country, and I want my country to be successful. I think people should be angry right now about what's happening. If you're not angry now, when are you going to get angry?
America has changed so much in the last few years, and there's an anti-science bias and an anti-education bias that's kind of flowing through our culture, and it is making us look like the laughing stock of the world, because the rest of the world has always been trying to emulate us and educate their people more and raise their standard of living. And what they see now is the United States that's reversing that process, and they just don't understand it.
I think, in my experience, a lot of the rest of the world, they are sad because someone has to be the city on the hill. Someone has to set the example. And sadly, there really hasn't been any country to set the example. And a lot of these countries, they don't want to look to China. They don't want to look to Russia. They want to look to the Western world, because the Western world, even though it's very flawed, has been a leader in many ways. And now it's not. And I think we have to reverse that, because God forbid for real, that China becomes the leading nation in the world. Because the leadership there is not, they're unashamed about who they are. They're proud to be authoritarian. And our country was an example of true democracy, or at least we had the aspiration of being an example of true democracy. And I don't think that aspiration exists in almost anywhere else, especially in our major rivals. Go ahead.
No, it's a void. It's a void in the world right now, and I agree with you completely. Uh, the United States is a large, powerful country. It's been very powerful militarily, and that has given us enormous clout all over the world. But that clout has always been seen as being done for the cause of freedom and for human rights. And now that has gone away. Nobody's seeing that anymore. And somebody will step in to fill the void. And unfortunately, the void could be filled by something quite negative and quite different
Yes.
than what any of us really want.
Well said. Did you ever hear about this Rush Limbaugh's 4 Pillars of Deceit?
I try to avoid listening to Rush. God bless him. I guess he has cancer now, but I haven't heard his 4 Pillars of Deceit. Maybe you could share it.
Well, the guy is terrible, and I'll say it boldly. He's an awful human being who's hurt our country. But he's been teaching or preaching on the radio. He's literally a preacher, okay? He's on the radio preaching brainwashing for 40 or 30 years now, or 25 years at least. But he has this principle of the 4 Pillars of Deceit, and they're made up. I'm trying to make sure I get it right here. The 4 Pillars of Deceit are, well, I wish I could find it. It's academia, media, science, and liberals. That's literally what he says. The 4 Pillars of Deceit are things you cannot trust are academia, the media, science, and liberals. That's what he says. I mean, that's what he's been teaching. This is a blog post that he wrote in let's see here. He's been saying it for 20 years. And we see the result. Well, 2013 is this one's from, but we see the results of that, which is people think the only one they can trust is President Trump, who's the least trustworthy of all. Go ahead.
Well, one of the consequences of that is that lack of trust, and that's sort of a worship of ignorance. And the problem with obviously with that is that you don't trust your experts anymore. And it's been said by a few different writers right now that if the United States had listened to the CDC and followed their guidelines right from the get-go, we could be in a whole lot better place, and maybe even reopening our economy again. But because so many people are buying into the Rush Limbaugh idea of putting down education and the press and science, we are now in deep doo-doo in this country, and we have lots of people dying. The curve in Erie County has not been flattened yet, and so we're paying a price for buying into people.
Well, here's the thing I want to say is we've had one of the worst months in our country's history in April. One of the worst months ever. It'll be remembered by our children and people for future generations as a tragic month. April was a tragic month for America.
Is that for the deaths?
The deaths,
yeah,
the ineptitude, the blaming of other people, the lack of responsibility. I think the silver lining is the leadership has come from our governors, and our governors have provided some level of leadership that has been a saving grace for America to show that America isn't a failed state. We're just in a crisis because of poor leadership at the very, very top. There's never been a moment like this in American history where we've had a leader so unwilling to accept responsibility for anything. Because let me just tell everybody out there, this is not over. These states that are opening up, they're not even close to following the scientific community's recommendations regarding mitigating the number of cases. When this thing started, we had 20,000 cases in the entire country when the quarantine started. There's 25,000 cases in Georgia alone. And if you don't think tens of thousands of more people aren't going to die next month or this month in May, you're fooling yourself. And It's incredibly tragic. Let's not even talk about what happened last month. Let's talk about what's happening today. We still don't have enough tests. If you were sick right now, are you confident you could get a test?
No,
100%
no.
confident.
Yeah,
How scary is that? How many months into this thing are we?
it's we've been here for a number of months. We can't get tests. I can't go out and buy a decent mask. We've made some for ourselves. The most fundamental thing, because this is an airborne, this can be transferred through the air over short distances. The COVID virus, you need when you're out in public, you need a decent mask. And our healthcare workers are having trouble getting them, and the rest of us have to either go to get some substandard mask on the internet or make our own. So we are really behind. We are really down. We are far behind where we need to be to protect ourselves.
Hey, someone's complaining about my blur. I don't know how to undo it. I'm sorry, whoever it is. Someone said get rid of the blur. I don't know how to do it. I'll figure it out later. I'm sorry, guys. So a couple questions here. Question here from no more questions about the ballot. Everyone understands we were very clear in the beginning. You have to get an application and then get the ballot. You got to do two things. I keep repeating it because I think people don't really get it. You have to get an application. The governor said he's going to mail everybody an application. That's step one. Do not sit on that application. Fill it out immediately and send it in. That's number one. Right, Dennis? You agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. That's been my message when I've been making calls for the McMurray campaign.
And thank you for all those calls. Listen, I want people to feel hopeful. I think we're far from collapsing as a country. I think it's a big wake-up call, however, that science is important, that education is important, that the media is important, even when you don't agree with it. Oh, listen, as a public figure, I get frequently angry at the media. Because I can't believe sometimes the way things are covered. I wish we had two newspapers in Buffalo, but let's make sure right now that the media is an important part of our country, and we need a media that questions people like me and like my opponent and holds us accountable. So we're far from collapsing, but we have a lot of work to do. If you look at what happened in Michigan yesterday, if you think that looks normal to the rest of the world, it doesn't. It looks insane. With people with Joker makeup waving Confederate flags take over a public facility, it's not acceptable. And we have to stand up to that type of lunacy, because when we accept that type of lunacy, it normalizes it.
I am shocked that the state of Michigan allows people to tote guns at these demonstrations. I'm not sure you could do that in New York State, but evidently you can in Michigan.
Jane, I'm sorry about the blurring in the back. A lot of people want to talk about the cancellation of the presidential primary. I'll be happy to talk about it. What do you think about it, Dennis? Let's hear your thoughts first.
Well, at first, it sort of made, considering the momentum, the shift of momentum towards Mr. Biden, it sort of made sense in a way. Bernie was getting to the point where he could not muster enough votes to guarantee that he could actually win the primary. So, in one sense, it makes sense. But I understand that that Bernie needs that we need the primary votes to give him the backup that he needs for helping to create the platform at the Democratic convention. And so that's about as much as I understand about it right now.
Listen, I will say, I don't pull punches. I think it was wrong. Okay. It definitely is something that concerns me. But I have to deal with reality as it is, not how reality is I want it to be. I totally disagree with those people who think that they can't support Joe Biden at all. I think everyone should. I think our democracy is in crisis right now. And you may say, well, the way that Bernie Sanders was treated also is a symbol of how our democracy is in crisis. And you're right. But anyone who's ever taken any type of ethics course or psychology course, or excuse me, philosophy course, realizes that you have to choose sometimes the best moral option, and the best moral option is defeating President Trump. Do I have reservations about um, Vice President Biden? Yes. You may have noticed in the past I've said nice things about him because I'm also someone who's not going to lie about what I experienced firsthand and personally. Listen, I'm not. You guys know me by now. I hope you know me. I'm not some wealthy guy that someone picked and said go run for Congress. I'm someone who said I want to stand up for what I believe in, and I started driving my car around and giving out T-shirts and talking to people, like some of the people on this call right now or this chat, like Cindy Appleton. I see you out there, Cindy. How are you? And many others. And I spent the time committed to this for a large part of my life, over 3 years. And in that 3 years, there's been a lot of cheap shots. A lot of ugly things have been said. A lot of people have tried to take me down and hurt me. And the establishment has not always been very helpful. So when I had a former vice president of the United States call and say, forget that very easily. I also can't forget the fact that I sat down with him one-on-one. I looked him in the eye and I expressed my concerns about Medicare for all. I said, I believe that every American should have health care. And he listened and was empathetic and um, didn't give me answers that were just off the shelf. He was thinking. I think he was actually much more powerful in one-on-one than I've seen him on television. Now, do I think he's the ideal candidate, the greatest candidate of all time? No, I don't. But I think that we have to pull together, because in my lifetime I've never seen anything like President Trump. And when the house is on fire, you got to act. And Dennis, I want to hear what you think about that. Do you think that Donald Trump is a threat to our democracy? I do.
Oh, yes, he is not. He is a threat to our democracy. He is. Yeah, I mean, the threat is ongoing right now, from everything from inciting people to riot and defy the law, to doing assassinations overseas, to limiting voter registration and making it very difficult for people to vote. And then the constant lying. I mean, we've had, I don't know what the score is now, 20,000 lies in the last 3 years. He just ends up discrediting everything about people in government. And because everybody looks to him as the leader, and when he misbehaves, it reflects on everybody. So yeah, he's really weakening our democracy. He's a threat.
I think he is a threat. And I also think he is advocating for a fascist or racist ideology. And I'm not going to pull punches on it. If our forefathers or people like Luther King didn't call things what they are and say, this is racism, this is wrong, things wouldn't have gotten better. And they're not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. But our generation, right now, you and me, Dennis, everybody listening to this, has a duty to say the president is encouraging racism, hatred, and division.
He is, and the thing is that we gave him a chance. I remember the day after the election, going into a sort of a depression about him being elected. And then I said to myself, well, let's give him a chance. Maybe there's more to Donald Trump than meets the eye. Unfortunately, after 3 years, there isn't more there. He's more twisted than I ever thought he was. And I had suspicions about him early on. And it's time to replace the man. I mean, this goes beyond political divisions. This guy's a threat to our democracy.
So I was still a small town supervisor when he won, and my town hall meeting, I said, I didn't vote for him. I don't like him, but I want him to be successful because he's the president of the United States. And I was ready to cheer for him like I would cheer for any leader for my country. But he has proven he is not worthy of that support. And we have to find a new way forward. By the way, AJ, you're right. If you guys want to add, listen, I would love any of those people, Bernie, Schumer, any of them, if they want to send their support, I'd love it. And if you guys can encourage them to do so, I'd love it. Remember, you guys are advocates for this race as much as anybody. When I speak up, it seems self-interested, like I want your endorsement. When you guys say endorse Nate, you're the constituents. that our state senators serve. I've already received the endorsement of Kristen Gillibrand. I'm very grateful for that. If Senator Schumer chooses to endorse me, I'll be very grateful for that. Or anybody else. I would love your emails to encourage people to support me. And you guys know what I represent. And many of you represent the same things. I want to say to Linda out there in Lewiston, I'm grateful for you, Linda. I love Lewiston too, by the way. It's one of my favorite places. And I love seeing all the signs on 18F. All you guys who put the signs up on 18F, I'm grateful for you. Okay, anything else we want to talk about or cover on this call today? Any other questions from the crowd out there? Hey, Nancy, how are you? What I want to say to you guys is keep writing your letters to the local papers. They help. If you can donate, donate. Every dollar we're going for will help us towards our goal. And we have a long way to go if we want to hold on to the seat and also secure the seat in June. If you haven't voted yet, get your application first, then get your ballot. If you're someone who is, if you're someone that's new to politics, great. Get your friends to vote. If the more people that don't normally or do not usually vote, that's good for our campaigns. We want to drive out new voters. So if you can get your friends to vote, vote. But all those things will help us win. And let me tell you right now, when I go to Washington, I'm not going to be any different than I am right now. I'm going to be the same guy. I'll try to be better. I try to improve every day, but I'm not going to be, the cat's not going to have my tongue. I'm going to say the things that I believe in. I'm going to fight for healthcare for every single American. I'm going to fight climate change. I'm going to fight for the same things you guys care about. And Dennis, I'll still be just as available to you then as I am now.
Wonderful.
Anything else you want to add, Dennis?
Well, I got to say that the other reason that I'm supporting you, Nate, is because I really want somebody in this to represent me in Congress that I can actually trust, and somebody who actually puts human values before everything else. That the values of the people of the United States come first. While business is important, I consider that secondary. And you seem to be the kind of guy that puts people first, and that's why I'm supporting you.
That's who I am. I have to be that way. I mean, everything I do, and I don't want to get too preachy, but everything I do is based on, I think about what would help my neighbors and what would help my family. And not really the family I have now, but really the family I grew up in. It was very, very poor. And I think what would help folks like that who need some help? And that's the perspective I come at it from. And I realize just from being in government for a little while that government can do a lot of good. And we forget that. We make governments into something that's evil and bad and wrong. But so many of the founding fathers, even Thomas Paine, talked about the power of government to help us improve our lives. And I'm not against government. I'm against bad government. And I think our government in general has been undermined for the last 40 years in this country. And I keep saying it, but we learned the hard way that when you don't have government, like we have right now, we have a failed federal government. We have good state governments, but we have a federal government that people suffer. And we have to get people into Congress, into the Senate, who believe in the power of government to actually help people and make their lives better. Dennis?
I completely agree. And I also agree with you that the situation in the United States is not hopeless, but it is a wake-up call. And this whole COVID thing is bringing to a head a lot of the weaknesses that exist within our existing system. And we're going to be counting on people like you, Nate, to start undoing the damage that's been done by this administration, and then rebuilding our reputation, both locally for our own people and in the world.
Well, let me say this to all those people watching, Linda, AJ, everybody. When I go to Washington, Dennis, you're all coming with me. It's a team. We're going together. It's gonna be we're all gonna be part of this, and you're all these people that have been on my side helping me fight for the last few years. Trust me, we're gonna keep working together to solve the problems for NY27. And with that, Dennis, look at I miss seeing you in person.
Yeah, I miss your dog too. That you used to bring into the campaign headquarters.
I
And
miss going to the campaign headquarters. It's just I want this to be over too, but we got to do it the right way.
yeah, well, I'm amazed that you can stand that you have the wherewithal to do it for another 2 months because this has all been extended.
Yeah. Well, but yeah, every day I get up, I do phone calls, then I do homework with my kids, then I do something like this, and I go to bed, and we start over the next day, every day. I mean, I'm such an active person. I want to go out and meet people like you. You've seen me. I like talking. I like being with people. I like having fun. This is driving me nuts, but it has to be that way. We got to keep people safe.
Are you going to be able to debate Chris Jacobs?
Better. I hope so. We had 2 debates scheduled. They canceled them. We're pushing every day. Guys, that's another thing. Write to the Buffalo News. Write to BFO and demand they do their debate. We can still do it. We'll do a social distancing debate.
Absolutely. You can do it right just this way.
I'd rather do it in person. Heck, I'll keep 6 feet away from them. Don't worry about that. But I'd rather do it in person. But if we can't, I'll do it like this. Whatever we need to do.
Okay, I look forward to that. I think that'd ice the deal for you.
Well, I'm going to ask him. I'm going to ask him straight out. Why were you encouraging people to go back to work a month ago? He put that poll. Why were you downplaying the threat of the virus? Why were you downplaying the need for tests? And I know it's uncomfortable for some people to hold people accountable, but part of the job of politics is to hold people accountable for bad decisions. Do you know, in all his time in office, he's only proposed 8 bills. I think that's the number. It's close to that. It's a very small number of bills because he's really not doing anything other than climbing the ladder here, climbing the ladder of his career as a politician. And I mean, these are things that I'm going to ask him about. What have you done already to make the lives of people in Western New York better? I can say what I've done or what I've tried to do. I want to see if he can too. And more importantly, at this time of crisis, why are you so willing to attack our governor, but not willing to say anything about President Trump?
He doesn't seem to believe. Well, he certainly seems to be in the Rush Limbaugh mode, where he doesn't believe in in science. He doesn't believe. He doesn't believe in education. And he is just following along the party line.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I could talk to you all night, Dennis, but I got little kids I got to put to bed.
Okay. Good talking to you, Nate.
And I'll see you soon. Bye.
See you next time. Bye-bye.